Okay, what you're looking at here is my workbook, and I've got 5 sheets down below with data on each sheet. Let me go back to sheet 1. And it was created in the latest version of Excel, Excel 2013. Now, if you want to convert it to an earlier version, to help those who have an earlier version of Excel be able to read it and find out if it's compatible with it, well, we learned that in the previous training video. This one's going to be about actually learning how to convert it, which actually we kind of learned how to do in the previous training video as well. If you recall, it's doing the Save As. So if you come up here, and you click on the Save As button, if you didn't add it to the Quick Access toolbar. So it brings up the Save As window, close out and go backstage, click on File, go down to Save As, and then come over here and click on Browse, brings up the same window. Now down below it's got the Save As type, and the current version, it doesn't say 2013, it just has Excel Workbook with the extension .xlsx. If you want to save it to an earlier version, click on the drop down arrow, and the only other option that you get is the earlier versions of 97 through 2003 and everything in between, like 2000 and 2002. It doesn't give you other options for 2007 or 2010 or 2000 through 2010 because basically the biggest change came in 2007. And just a quick overview, if you look at the earlier version here that you can convert it to, the extension .xls, it only has 3 letters. Again, the extension lets the operating system know what program this file is supposed to be opened up in. So XLS is Excel. Also, you can see it up here, XLS, the same extension, except it adds an extra X. That extra X is for extensible markup language, a more stable file format, that when you save your workbook with this extra X, which is only in the later versions of Excel from 2007 to 2013, you get smaller file sizes, it's more stable, and if there's corruption, you have a better chance of opening it up and being able to view those parts that aren't corrupted than if you saved it in an earlier version. But that's not the point. If somebody has an earlier version of Excel that's in the range of 97 through 2003, then go ahead and select it and save it. If not, then you don't need to convert it, just go ahead and send it to them, and there might be some compatibility issues with 2007 and 2013, so you can watch my previous training video on it and find out what it is, and then decide, okay, that's not compatible. Let me go ahead and remove this fancy formatting so whoever has 2007 can actually read it without the formatting getting in the way or looking funny. In any case, to go ahead and save it to that earlier version, it's really simplistic. Go ahead and select the Save As type, and there you go. You can go ahead and rename it, Bob's database, because he doesn't have the latest version of Excel, so we want to convert it. Might as well slap his name on it, Sales Database. Well, we can save it in the folder on the desktop, the exercises folder, or we can just come over here in the navigation pane and save it right to the desktop and click Save. And there you go. Once you click Save, it opens up in that version that you saved it to, and you can see it up at the top, Bob Sales, and the extension XLS, not the extra X, that signifies that it's a later version of Excel. And we can go ahead and close out. There it is on the desktop. Double click on it to open it back up. And then kind of as a quick review, if you got fancy formatting applied to any one of your cells or charts or things like that, that when you do a Save As you recall in the previous training video, a compatibility checker will pop up and say, hey, I don't like these formats. If you go ahead and just send it off and don't get rid of them, then there's a chance that they might not be readable, or they might be converted to a picture and not usable if it's like a chart. Keep that in mind, and in fact, let's go ahead and close out. Open up the exercises folder. And let's go back to the convert that has the extra X there, so we know it's created in a more recent version. And then go ahead and just do something that's really different, that's not available in the earlier versions of Excel. Go ahead and select Arrange, and then come up here on the Home tab to the Styles group. Click on Conditional Formatting. Let's do Data Bars. Ooh, blue is fun. Select that. Click off. Looks good, right? So if you want to go ahead and save that as an earlier version, click on Save As. In fact, let me go ahead and close out. The other way you can do this is click on the File tab and go down to Export, and then you can change the file type. I mean, that's what we were doing. Remember the type drop-down arrow when you opened up the Save As window? Well, it's the same thing here. When you click on Change File Type, you can choose what file type you want to change it to without that open window. In fact, even if you choose Template, double-click on it, it still opens up the window, but now it's in template. You can still change it on the fly here and say, okay, now I want you as an earlier version. In any case, that's another way you can do it. Just find the way that works best for you. There's more than one way to do this, or to get to the same Save As window here. And let's go ahead and do it on the desktop. And let's select Bob. And when I select his name, it replaces the name that was here. And when I click Save, it's going to override it or replace that file with the changes I made here, and click Yes. And then there's the compatibility checker that we talked about in the compatibility checker training video. Go ahead and watch that to learn more about this and know that, hey, it doesn't like what it sees here as far as sending this off to somebody who has that earlier version of Excel from 97 through 2003, maybe even 2007, and all the things you can do as we talked about in that video to go ahead and I'm going to click Cancel. Make it more viewable and less likely to run into errors or issues of being able to look at what you have here. You may have to remove it altogether because those earlier versions probably won't even look at this or convert it or change it and just not make it readable. In any case, you take your chances here, or you can test it on your own. For me, go ahead and select it and just get rid of the conditional formatting to clear rules from selected cells. Basically, if you don't have any fancy formatting, you can eliminate a lot of your problems when it comes to saving it into the earlier versions of Excel and getting that pop-up, the policeman, the compatibility checker. Now, if you want to go over the topic a little bit more in depth than what we covered in the video, you can of course come back up here to the upper right-hand corner and click on the Excel Help button, that question mark. You can see in the pop-up, you can also hit the F1 key, click on it, opens up the window, and let me maximize it. You can see you've got some popular searches. If it's not answered here, getting started, or basics and beyond, then go ahead and click in the search online help, which, by the way, if you don't have internet connection, you can click on the drop down arrow and change it to where you can get the help from your computer. Now, it may not be as detailed as looking online, but nonetheless you can change it if you don't have access to the internet. I'm going to click off and leave it as is. Now, one of the topics we can learn about here is the SkyDrive. Hey, SkyDrive. What is that? That sounds kooky. I mean, is there really a hard drive out there in the clouds somewhere up in the sky? Could be a satellite. In any case, go ahead and hit enter, and let's read more about it. So go ahead and click on one of the topic links, read about it, and ooh, they got some pretty pictures. That's fun. And then when you're done, you can go ahead and hit the back arrow to go back, or click home, and it takes you right back to the home page here. You can also print, use larger text when it comes to reading it. And then also, if you choose one of these topics and you're like looking at it and it says to do this in Excel and you want to do it, you can of course go ahead and restore this down so you can see Excel and come over here and click on it and whoops, where did my help window go? Well, it went behind this window here, so to bring it back to the front of it, come down here on the taskbar, click on it, and brings it back up to the top. So if I want it to stay there while I'm reading it and working in my Excel workbook, then come up here and click on the push pin to keep it. As I click off of it, and it stays there on top. I'm going to go ahead and undo it. And then, by the way, about the SkyDrive, if you do want to save your documents, your workbook here, to the SkyDrive, come up here and click on the File tab. Go down to Save As, and there it is, SkyDrive. Select it, and there's a simple explanation of it. Use the SkyDrive to access your files from anywhere and share with anyone. Well, first you have to sign up, get a username and password, then sign in. Go ahead and store it on the, again, it's referred to the SkyDrive or cloud, someplace where it's out in the middle of nowhere when really it's just a name to be able to put it on Microsoft's computers. I'm going to go ahead and hit the back arrow and then come down here, bring up the Excel help, and close out. What you're looking at here is a mini database of essential oils sales made in the U.S. in the months of January, February, March, and April. So I have my labels there for the data down below, but I have more than one data within that column or cell that contains data because I want to keep track of it by employee. So I have the labels for the employees by employee ID. So we've got a cross tab going here, so I can do a cross-reference with employee who made sales, but in which month. So I have labels in the columns to identify in the month of January, February, and March, and also April. And then what I can do is for this column here to get the total for the month of January, well, you can see the label over to the left-hand side. I'll enter the data in here or create a formula to go ahead and add that up. And then also for my rows here by employee, I can get the total for the employee and add it over here. Now, before I forget and we start entering in formulas, when you're inside a database, a range where cells are all together and they're not scattered, and I'll go over the basics of creating a database correctly or properly so you don't come across errors when you're sorting your database. In any case, To be able to zip around really fast, if you want to go ahead and click over to the right hand side, that's fine. But if your database is like maybe dozens of columns long and you want to get to the end of the column really fast, either to the right or to the left, or rows, maybe down to row 2000 or up to row 7, then just go ahead and hover over the border of the cell that you have selected. And if I hover over the bottom border and I double click really fast, it automatically advances down to the last row within this data range here. And if I do the left double click, goes to the first column, double click the top row, and double click the right border to the column all the way over to the right within this data range. Sweet. Okay, let's go ahead and enter in the monthly total here for January. So there's the column of data. And what I want to do is I want to add up this cell for this employee who made sales there. So that's, let's see, I'm in column C, row 7. You can see the name box is C7, so that's going to be C7. Go down to the next cell. It's still the same column, so it's still going to be C, but we're advancing it by one row, so it's going to be C8 plus C9 plus C10. So let's go ahead and write a formula. And to tell Excel that this is going to be a formula that we want it to calculate, always go ahead and type in the equals key first, and then that will trigger Excel to say, okay, whatever comes next, I'll perform the calculation on it, given that you write it correctly in any case. So the first cell is C, and then when you start typing it in, it'll pull up a list of other functions you can select from, but we'll ignore that. We'll go over that later. Just keep typing 7 and it disappears. And you can see that it selects the cell C7 and it has it in a nice pretty color blue. Ooh, that's fancy. Because when you hit the plus key to add the next cell, which is one row down but still the same column, so C8, it changes the color and gives it another one so you can distinguish easily between the two. So when you're looking at C8, and you come up here and you go, and let's see, C, is this column 8? No, 9. Oh, there's 8. You can easily spot it by the color, okay? So that's very helpful. So let's go to C9, and then plus C10. And that's it. Hit enter, and hey, we got the total there. How do you know it's the correct total? Well, go ahead and get a calculator out and add it up. But the other way you can do it is go ahead and click and drag and select the range. Again, when you're selecting a range, make sure that you got the white cross up and not hovering over a range that's already selected and get the black cross. That's not the selection mode, as we talked about in an earlier training video, or the lower right hand corner, which is the black cross. We want the white cross. So click and drag, make your selection, and down below on the status bar, as we covered in an earlier training video, you can customize it, but by default it gives you the sum of the range that you have selected. So what we have selected here is 741.49, and that's the formula right there. Sweet. You also get the average and count. You can right click on it to customize it, saying, hey, I don't want to see the sum down below, but now I do, so let me go ahead and check it to see it, and there you go. Let's go ahead and click off. Okay, we start with the basics. I'm going to go ahead and, as we move along, show you some shortcuts, so hopefully it doesn't take as long to go ahead and, in this case, add up a range of cells. And the reason why I'm starting with the basics is because later on, you might be in a situation where it's very helpful. Let's go ahead and move on to the next column here for February. And instead of typing in equals and then the cell C7 plus, well, in this case, we're in the different column, D7 plus D8 plus D9, just go ahead and hit equals again to start the calculation process for Excel. Go ahead and click on the first cell, then hit the plus key, click, plus, click, plus, click. I mean, that goes a lot faster for me. I don't know about you. By clicking, then having to type in D7, D8, and so on, hit enter, and hey, pretty sweet. Now, if you made a mistake and you need to go back and make some changes, you can go ahead and select that cell again that contains the formula and look up in the formula bar, and you can see up above the formula as opposed to the results of the formula. So down below, you've got the actual value of what we added up above, and if you need to make changes, come up here, and if it's supposed to be, well, let's say you missed D9, so if we come up here and we edit it, in fact, we can delete it, just hit the backspace key. You can see now it disappears, so it's these two cells, skip the next one, and then hit enter. You're like, oh, well, I didn't mean to do that. You can go back and go ahead and add that back in again. Click just right after it in the formula bar, plus D9. And it doesn't have to be uppercase. It's just a lot easier for me if I type in lowercase, even though it doesn't look as pretty. And then plus, and then you can see all the different fancy colors there, letting me know that up in the formula bar, D7 is the first cell, D8. It's easy to identify. Hit enter, and then go ahead and select it again, and it automatically puts the lowercase d in uppercase. So in any case, you can go ahead and do it all lowercase. Also, if you double click really fast on the cell, it actually opens up and removes the value or the result of the formula within the cell so you can make the changes down below. You don't have to come all the way up here into the formula bar. Again, if you double click, so you can go ahead and make the changes in the cell there, and then hit enter or hit the escape key to back out, which is a good rule of thumb because if you double click to get in here and you like delete part of it and you add a couple of plus signs, you're like, I don't want to go through all this and try to correct it, hit the escape key and it reverts back to what it was before you started messing with it. If you hit enter, then it's going to say, okay, I accept this as it is, or it may not if the formula isn't correct. Now we can go ahead and go to the next range here for the month of March and add it up, but there's a shortcut. Since there's a pattern being established going from one column to the next within the same range here of rows, if you go ahead and you select, well, this cell or that cell, and you copy it, the cell that has the formula in it, and you can copy it one of many ways. You can do Control-C on the keyboard, and you see those, well, I call them marching ants. They look like a bunch of little ants running around, but that's to let you know that Excel has that cell selected when you say copy. Let me hit the escape key to stop it. Again, the escape key is really beautiful and I love it. You can either do that or come up here on the Home tab to the Clipboard group and click on Copy. There you go, you got the ants, or hit the Escape key, or you can right-click on that cell, and there's the copy as well. And then go ahead and go to another cell, and to paste it, you'd think, wait a second, if we paste that, then we're just going to get the same number, right? No, because what it's copying is the formula of the cell, but it's going to update the formula so it doesn't copy this range, because remember, the formula here is this range in the C column. But because Excel recognizes a pattern, once it goes over to this column, it'll say, wait a second, we're in another place. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what place we're in, and just copy it over and update it to this column here. So instead of being C7, C8, it's going to be E7, E8. Do you trust me? Let's go ahead, and to paste it, you can use the shortcut key, Control-V as in Victor, or right-click, and go ahead and just do values. But if you do values, it doesn't copy or paste the formula over. Or you can go ahead and just do a simple paste. You got a bunch of different paste options that we'll go over, so keep that in mind when you right-click what you want to paste over. So if I do values, well, it didn't copy the formula over and paste it. It just did the result, which is the value. And if we don't copy the formula over, it's not going to update it and give us the correct number here. It's just copying the number here and pasting it over there, so we don't want that. Let's go ahead and hit undo. It's still in the copy mode, so you can go ahead and right-click again and then just do the first paste. It pastes the formula over, or again, Control-V as in Victor to paste, or come up here on the Home tab to the Clipboard group and do the paste clipboard there. You can see in the pop-up Control-V will also paste. And there you go. Let me hit the escape key so I can stop the marching ants here and not have that cell in copy mode. And with this cell selected, you can see up in the formula bar, it's not the exact same. I mean, it is as far as rows go. I mean, there's 7, 8, 9, and 10, and there's rows 7 through 10. But in the March column, which is what? Column E. So cool. I don't have to go through all that work again. I can just copy and paste, and then Excel will see the pattern, update it, and say, okay, we're in a different column. Let me just go ahead and update it, and there's the same formula, but being in a different column here, let's just go ahead and update that to the E column. Now, another way you can do this besides copying and pasting is that we've got one more to go here. You can simply hover over the lower right-hand corner of the cell that you have selected, which is, well, adjacent to it, and you see the black cross. That's known as the autofill handle, and we'll cover that later on. But to keep it very simplistic and basic, it'll actually, when you click and drag, basically perform a copy of what we have selected here. So if I get the black cross, click and drag to the right and let go. Ooh, that's cool. And you can see when I have it selected, it copied over the same formula, but it updated it because we're in a new column here. So we've got the same rows, but now we're in column F. So the total for column F for the month of April is 901.53. Select the range. You can confirm it down below in the status bar, 901.53, sweet. Okay, let's go ahead and do some other formulas, like let's do another basic one for the average. So for this month, what's the average? Let's see if I eyeball it. Okay, the lowest value in that range is 110. The highest is 220. And in fact, most of them are in the 200s, so maybe 195 or so. In any case, let's get the exact average for the range here. Again, you can click and drag to select it and get a temporary average down below. Ooh, I was only off by 10. 185. Okay. In any case, the formula for getting the average is taking the total and dividing it by, well, how many employees do we have here? 4, to get the average between all the employees for the sales in the month of January. So we can hit the equals key on the keyboard again to let Excel know we're starting another calculation. And what cell has the total? It's that one right there. And then the symbol for dividing, again, the cell total right here by the number of employees is the /. You have the / and the backslash. The / is the key on the keyboard that has the question mark above it. If you hit that, it won't add the question mark unless you hold down the Shift key at the same time. So don't hold down the Shift key. Just hit the question mark and it'll add a /. As opposed to, let me hit the backspace key, the backslash, which is above the Enter key on the keyboard. No, we don't want that. So back to the question mark, that adds the /. That's for division. And then go ahead and type in the number 4 and hit Enter. And there's the average. You can go ahead and click and drag. Again, you saw it down here, the average. So the formula here that we entered is correct. Cool. Now we can go ahead and do it again, but let's do it another way. Let's go ahead and type in the equals key on the keyboard. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and add up the range here if we don't have the total. And we can do that by selecting a cell, plus, select plus, select plus, select plus. The last plus isn't necessary. We want to go ahead and divide the total here by the number of employees to get the average. And so if I do the / and then type in 4, now there's something wrong with this formula. It's going to add the first cell, then the second, then the third, then the last one is going to divide it by 4. I mean, that's not going to be the correct average when I hit Enter, because when you select it, the range, you can see we're way off because it's taking the last cell and dividing it by 4 when it should take the sum you can see up in the formula bar of everything that we add up first and then divide it by 4. So if you remember back in your algebra days, there's the order of operation. We want to add up everything first, which is the first order. Then after it, the second thing to do is to divide it by 4. So if I go ahead and double click on the cell really fast, I can go ahead and update it down below, or I can select it and update it in the formula. It doesn't matter. But the order of operation starts with parentheses here, saying, okay, whatever's in parentheses, do first. So I'm going to add an open parentheses on the left-hand side, beginning with the first cell, and then close it off on the right-hand side with the last cell. So it says the first thing you're going to do is add up everything. Then after you add up everything and you get a total there, then go ahead and go outside to the second order of operation and divide everything there by 4. Not just D10, but everything, the total, okay? And then go ahead and hit Enter. Hey, there we go. Let's go ahead and click and drag, select the range, and you can see down below the average is 191.69. Now you could say, hey, wait a second, my databases are going to be perfect and I'll never have to do that. I'll just go ahead and do the shortcut when I do my average, which is equals, and then get the total here and divide it by 4, and I'm done. Well, if you have a database where you've got a number over here, a number down here, it's not all together, you want to do a quick average, and maybe you have a number that's over on column AA, row 10, well, instead of clicking all over the place, if you know the cells, then you can just go ahead and type it in without having to, scroll, find it, click on it, and then scroll back. So you can see the advantage of having to do it. As you recall in our first formula, we started off the long way by just typing in the cells that we know we want to add up. I mean, granted, it's all right there, and there's even a faster shortcut than what I've shown you here, which we'll cover in the next training video. But definitely, each way has its own usefulness to it. I'm all for shortcuts as long as it makes sense and it works with my database. So, let's come back over here. You may do it by simply getting a total and dividing it by 4, or adding up a range, dividing it by 4 with the order of operation. And then once you have that, since they're adjacent to one another, you can just go ahead and copy and paste. And so you've got the last formula here. Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste, or let me hit the Escape key. You can use the autofill handle, hover over the lower right-hand corner of the cell that has the formula that you want to copy over to the next cell adjacent to it, let go, and there you go. So you can see up in the formula bar, it equals F12. It doesn't equal E12. It advanced to the next column, and you can click and drag, confirm it down below, until you feel comfortable that what I'm showing you is accurate. In any case, you can pull out a calculator and add it up as well. All right, you don't have to use cells to go ahead and do a calculation. In other words, if I want to do some quick math and say, okay, what's 9 times 220? You can just go ahead and click off in any cell, type in equals, do 9, and the symbol for multiplication is the asterisk, which is over on the right-hand side of the keyboard and the keypad, or you can hold down the Shift key and hit the number 8 on the main part of the keyboard. So there's multiply, and then 220. And you see how I'm not selecting other cells. I'm actually putting it all into one cell and saying just perform the calculation there, hit enter. There you go. So if you have data out here that you want to include in the formula, as you saw up here, you can do it. Or if you don't have any data out here and you want to do something quick, and then when you're done, just delete it, that works too. And then, of course, don't forget subtraction. So if we go equals, we type in 1,000 minus 999, enter 1. As you recall in the previous training video, we learned how to create basic formulas, simple arithmetic like adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, and we even did it to a range of cells to get the total down below and also the average. Well, in this training video, we're going to go beyond simple formulas to something more complex known as functions. In other words, what you put in the function will spit out something, and hopefully it's what we're looking for here. And the two functions we're going to be working on is the sum and average. The sum is, well, just like it sounds, summing up a range of cells. In fact, it's really a shortcut for quickly adding up a range without having to type it in or click each cell. But before I do that, when you look at a database and there's formulas and functions in it, how can you tell which cells contain formulas and functions? I mean, if I come down here and I type in a number that looks like the same one up above, well, because it is, which one contains a value or just somebody entering in data, and the one that contains the result of a formula? Well, you can go ahead and click inside the cell, look up in the formula bar, and there you go. The formula is hidden, but the end result or the value of the formula is displayed here. If you want to reverse that and display the formula but not the value, so you can tell which cells contain formula or functions, it also works with functions, then you want to use the shortcut keys Control, hold down the Control key, and hit the tilde or the apostrophe. It's that key to the left of the 1 key with the exclamation point above the 1. Go ahead and hit Control, tilde, and it expands and it shows you all the formulas but hides the value or the end result of the formula or function. So all these other cells don't have formulas or functions because, well, they're just displaying simple values. Or down below, the values are now hidden, that you can see the formula and functions and quickly go, oh, okay, these are the cells that are dependent upon other cells to get the values that we want down below. And you can go ahead and select another cell and see that that's dependent upon what's selected up above in blue, over here, this range, and in any case, to go ahead and toggle back to hide the formulas and functions, Control tilde again, and we're back to where we started. And let me come down here and select the cell and hit the delete key, get rid of that. So to start with the first function, it's the sum function. It adds up a range of cells, and there's many ways you can insert the function. One way is to type it in, simply type it. And whenever you insert a formula or a function, or you start typing one, always start with the equals. Hit the equals key on the keyboard so Excel knows that whatever you type after it, it's going to calculate it. In other words, when I hit equals and I type in SUM so I can bring up the sum function, you can see FX, that means it's a function, and there it is, sum. You can also arrow down and look at all the others and select those. In fact, when you select one, it gives you a synopsis of that function, adds a cell specified by a given set of conditions or criteria, or just the basic sum function adds up all the numbers in a range of cells. And so you want to make sure you hit the equals key before you start typing it in, because, let me hit escape a couple of times to undo that or get out of the cell and not accept the changes. If I just start typing in sum, Excel goes, oh, you're just in data entry mode. I don't have to do any work. So let's hit the backspace key, type in the equals, and signify to Excel that, hey, we're going to type in something we want you to calculate, and it's going to be a function. As soon as you start typing in the first letter, it pulls up a list of functions that are available, and we want to narrow it down to sum. And when you see the sum highlighted, then all you have to do is go ahead and either double click on it to accept it, or let me hit the escape key and type it in again, equals SUM. When it's highlighted here, you can also hit the tab key and it pops it open up above and you can see the syntax down below. And so the function says it wants to sum up something. And you can sum up a range of data, the first range, this is for the second range, and so on and so forth. So to keep it simple right now, let's just do one range. What range do we want to quickly add up or sum up? It's over here. You can, well, either go ahead and type it in or just click and drag and select the range. And notice if I start selecting it and it kind of goes off all over the place, just go ahead and click and drag again so you can get the range that you want. Now when you look over here at the syntax up above, you see how it starts with C7 and ends with F7, but there's a colon in between. The colon means through. So C7, start over here and go through F7. And then when we're finished, we can go ahead and hit enter, or if we have additional ranges that we want to add, including this one, then notice how in the syntax it's got number 1 in bold, and then it's got a comma. If you go ahead and follow suit and type in the comma, it goes to the next range, number 2. So what's the second range? Well, it could be this down here, and then comma, number 3, that down here, and you can just keep doing it until the cows come home, but I'm not going to do that. So let me hit backspace, 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 and go all the way back. So I just have the first range and hit enter. Sweet. We get the results here. If you click and drag and select it, you can look down below on the status bar, 56201, 56201. Now you get this little green error checking that pops up that says, hey, something's wrong with the function. Well, maybe not wrong, but something that it wants you to be aware of. So when you select the cell, you get this little tag that pops over to the left-hand side. You get the pop-up when you hover over it. This is the formula in the cell refers to a range that has additional numbers adjacent to it. Well, there's no additional numbers adjacent to it, but to get more specific, click on the drop-down arrow, and it says it's omitting adjacent cells. Okay, that makes more sense. This adjacent cell is omitted. Okay, it's not included, and it wants you to know that. Are you okay with that? If so, then you can just leave it as is and just keep going on. Or if you don't like to see the error, you can click on the drop-down arrow and say ignore. Now, after a while, if you start ignoring a lot of errors and you're like, ooh, maybe there are some errors I should pay attention to, but oh, too late, I just ignored them. Hold on, we can go ahead and change that. We can reset the worksheet so all the errors that you ignored will come back and like ghosts and haunt you. Okay, so we can do that by coming up here, clicking on the File tab to go backstage down to Options. Come up here, click on Formulas, and it's right here, Error Checking. So click on Reset Ignored Errors and they'll all come back. Spooky. And then by the way, since we're here, by default this is checked where it enables background error checking. So Excel's going to look for patterns. If you break a pattern, it's going to think it's an error. You can go ahead and uncheck that if you don't want any error checking, in case if you're being annoyed by all those green little indicators, which by the way, you can change the color and do something else and bring out the inner artist in you and do something like red. Fabulous. I'm going to go ahead and click reset, click okie dokie, and it comes back, okay? That is until I ignore it again. Now, if I need to make any changes to what I've selected, you can go ahead and double click on it and it selects the range and the syntax is back up. You can go ahead and add a comma and then go to the next range, but I'm not going to do that. Or you can go ahead out into the range that's been selected and manipulate it. If you hover over one of the corner handles where you can see its little box and you get arrows pointing in opposite directions, you can click and drag to expand it over or down, and just include a whole range of cells, but I'm going to go back. Or better yet, if you go out here and you're like, whoops, I didn't mean to do that, and you're having problems and you want to go back, forget it. Just hit the escape key so it doesn't accept the changes that you were trying to do but then decided to undo. Or better yet, you can hit enter and just undo it, but it's better for me just to hit the escape key. You can also do it to simple formulas here. If you double click, it shows you all the different cells that are part of the formula. And if you're like, you know what, I don't want it to add up this cell, I want this cell maybe somewhere else. You can go ahead and click the border of the cell and move it over here. So I know it doesn't make sense as far as, hey, what are you adding up? But you get the idea. In your spreadsheet, if you have cells here and you have a cell over here that you want to include, then you can always rearrange it, move it around if you'd like, or just click and drag the border to move it back. We're back to where we started, hit enter, fabulous. Now, if you want, you can just simply type through the function when it pops up there, like equals sum, and you can see it's coming up there, and just hit the tab key so it pops open. And instead of using the mouse and clicking and dragging, you can just keep typing through and saying, okay, it's going to be C8 colon CF8, enter, there you go. I mean, there's benefits or advantages not having to click and drag, especially if you've got 100 rows to click and drag down within the column, because once you start dragging, Excel sometimes gets a little excited and jumps way ahead, and next thing you know, you're down to row 10,000. So it's better if you know the range, instead of clicking and dragging to select it, just to go ahead and type it in, all right? Hey, we're omitting adjacent cells, we'll ignore. Now, in addition to go ahead and typing in the first couple of letters to bring up the function here, Let me go ahead and choose the next cell down below and use the sum function to add up this range here. But instead of typing it in, remember when you type it in equals SUM, well, in any case, the first letter, you see the FX. The FX is also up here, and you can insert the function by clicking on the button up there if you'd like. Let me go ahead and hit the escape key a couple of times so I can get back out. And why would you want to do that? Well, when you click on the insert function button, you get a little bit more information, a little bit more details that may be helpful when it comes to figuring out a function and knowing what to place inside each of the fields. For example, click on Insert Function. There's the window. You can go ahead and search for a function by typing it in and then clicking Go. Or with most recently used selected, you can look down below and see if it's something that's been recently used, like the sum function, and then get a synopsis about it. Adds up all the numbers in a range of cells. You can add up 1 range, 2 ranges, 3 ranges, as many as you'd like. Or you can click on the drop-down arrow and see if it's in one of the categories. Is it in financial, date and time? In any case, you can select all and bypass that. And it's sorted alphabetically, so the A's all the way down to the S's. There it is. In fact, let's just go ahead and scroll back up. And let's just type it in. Let's delete that. Type in sum and click Go right there. So once you have it, select it, click Okie dokie, and it opens up the function's arguments, which gives you a little bit more information and shows you a little bit more detail, especially if you're working from one part of the screen but trying to add up cells in another part that you can't see right here. So instead of, the range over to the left-hand side, maybe it's in column AA. And in fact, if you look at this, the range that it pulls up by default is the H column. Oh, that's kind of kooky. I don't want to add up the range up above. And the reason why Excel is doing that, because it is looking at adjacent cells. It looks like we got some adjacent cells here. I'll just quickly latch onto these guys. And we're like, no, we don't want to do that. So instead, you can either go ahead and type in the range here if you want. And that would be, of course, C9 colon, which again means through, F9. You can do lowercase, that's fine. And when you're done typing, a couple of things happen. First of all, it shows you the numbers for each cell here, or as many as it can fit. You can compare to 110.34, 210.34. So that way, if you're in one part of the worksheet and you're summing up a range that you're typing in some cell range that you can't see within the screen there, and you see a bunch of numbers that you're not familiar with, at least that's a clue that maybe you got the wrong range. In any case, you get some of the samples there within the range to compare or look at. And then down below, it gives you the total and the formula result 901.03. That's good to know, because if the result comes back and you're like, that's not what I expected, then you want to take a look at the range you have selected, the data that's coming into the function. If it's garbage in and it's garbage out, just make sure you get the correct range and the correct data so you can get the formula result that you're looking for. You can do it that way and just click OK, or let me go ahead and delete it. These little boxes here are collapsible. They're known as the collapsible dialog box buttons. When you click on it, it collapses the screen so you can click and drag the title bar, move the window, not the screen, out of the way, where you can go ahead and click and drag to select the range, and then go ahead and click on it to expand it, and then click and drag it up so we can see it. Click for the next range, number 2, select another range. You can also hit the Enter key on the keyboard to expand it. You can keep going on and on and on, but we'll just keep it for the first range here, and click Okie dokie, and there we go. Let's go to the next one. And there's not only the function button here that you can click on, but you can also go to the Formulas tab. There's Insert Function. And also, well, there's the Auto Sum. It's the sum function that will quickly sum up. In fact, you can see in the pop-up down below, it is the sum function. Let me click on the drop-down arrow. There's more functions, and it pulls up the same window. But let's take a look at the Auto Sum, though. If you click on that, automatically it inserts the function, which is really fast. But then again, it's doing its thing here, trying to find a pattern, saying, oh, I got adjacent cells. Let me select the range up above. And you're like, no. All you have to do is go ahead and click and drag to select another range, hit Enter, and sweet. I mean, that was really fast. If you're on the Formulas tab, go ahead and click in the cell, click Auto Sum, click and drag, hit Enter. I think that's the fastest way when it comes to adding up a range of cells by using that feature. How about the average? Go ahead and click in the average cell for the employee ID, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, and then click on the Auto Sum drop-down arrow. We also got the Auto Average, and then go ahead and click and drag, hit Enter, and then copy and paste that to the rest of the cells so you don't have to keep doing that over and over again. And as you recall, the fastest way to copy and paste is by using the autofill handle. Hover over the bottom right hand corner until you see the black cross, click and drag, it automatically copies and pastes and fills in the formula up above to the cells down below, but going by a pattern. So it says, okay, this formula in the next row is going to be just that, the next row, so it's not looking at row 7 anymore, but row 8. And you can see up here in the formula bar, when I use the up and down arrow keys to go up, row 7, down to row 8, 9, the columns are the same, but it's the rows that are updating. To find the highest value or the lowest within a given range, you can use the max and min functions, and I've got the labels here. Max is for maximum, min is for minimum. And for example, if I'm looking at the month of January and I want to find out which employee had the highest in sales, well, it's a small database, you can eyeball it, and there it is, 220, and the lowest is that employee right there, 110. But you can imagine if you have dozens or hundreds or thousands of cells to go through, I recommend that you use the max and min functions in any case. Next to the label, let's go ahead and insert our functions. And there's a couple of ways you can insert functions, and we learned that in the previous training video, but my favorite way is to hit the equals key on the keyboard and then type in the first couple letters of the function and then arrow down to the function. And again, you get the synopsis of what that function is all about. It returns the largest value in a set of values, but it will ignore logical values and text. So if you select a range that includes logical values and text, don't worry about it, it'll just ignore it. And then go ahead and hit the tab key once you have it selected so it can pop open the function with the syntax where it says, okay, what's your first range? If you have additional ranges, just hit the comma on the keyboard after you select your first range and do number 2, number 3. In fact, you can see first range, comma, and then it boldens the next one, number 2 in the syntax, where you can go ahead and select that. It's still in bold, so for us to get to number 3, we have to hit the comma, then that's in bold, and you can go and go and go, and well, we're not going to go. Let's just hit the backspace key so we just get this range. And if you want to adjust a range, then you can go ahead and hover over one of the 4 handles there in the corners of the selected range until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, then click and drag, and let's include the cell that contains January so we can see that it's going to ignore it and still give us the highest value and not give us an error because we included the cell that contains text. And it's 220. Let's go ahead and hit enter. Voila, there we go. Sweet. The other way you can do it, let's do it for the minimum or the lowest number, which is going to be 110. So you can either go ahead and type in the equals key, or you can come up here on the formula bar and click on insert function, or you can go ahead and click on the formulas tab to insert function, or find in one of the categories which category contains the minimum function. It's up to you which way you want to do it. And you may say to yourself, well, wait a second, the equals is just the simplest and fastest way to go. Yeah, for functions that you're familiar with, but if you want to learn something new and you're not sure about it, then clicking on the insert function button to open up the insert function window and then type in the function that you are not too sure about, and let's say it's min, then go ahead and click go, and it's selected down below, and whatever you select down below will give you a synopsis. You can say for min returns the smallest number in a set of values, but it ignores logical values and text. So we can go ahead and click okie dokie, opens up the function arguments, and it gives us more details. Currently, it says that it wants to look at cell C15. Again, Excel is logical. When it sees numbers adjacent to the cell that you want to insert the function in, it wants to pull that in to, well, try to save you time because it thinks that you wouldn't put a function away from a list of values or a range of values. And so it tries to help you out, but that's fine. It's not being helpful here, at least for what I've got. So what I can do is I can go ahead and type in the range. 7, it can be lowercase colon, which means through C10. And then you can see the values are selected right there. The end result is 110. So you can kind of check yourself before you accept it to say, okay, well, that works. Or you can click on the collapsible dialog box button and then click and drag the range. But make sure that if you do that, you can see that since I had it typed in, it wants to add that range as well. Let's just go ahead and delete that and then click and drag so we just have one selected range and not adding it to another. Then hit enter to pop it back open, hit enter again, and sweet. And then as we discussed in earlier training videos, when you want to go ahead and take that formula and also insert it in other cells, the shortcut, well, a couple of shortcuts is you can copy and paste or use the autofill handle, which is in the lower right hand corner. Hover over it until you see the black cross and then click and drag it. Of course, this only works with the cells that are adjacent to it. You can't click and drag it all the way up here because you're passing through another range. And then come over here Like I said, you can copy, Control C, and then Control V as in Victor to paste it, or click and drag to do the autofill. And speaking of the autofill, if you're going to do an autofill in a column, a shortcut for doing it, let me go ahead and delete this range. And you can see the first one here is the average for this employee, and then we want to go ahead and autofill in the rest. Well, we clicked and dragged it down before, but when you're in a column, if you double click really fast on the black candle, it automatically, according to Excel's logic, it sees the range here. They're consecutive cells, so it automatically fills it in for you. What you're looking at here is a mini database, the Dreamforce payroll. We've got the employees, we've got their benefits, dental, medical, or dental and medical, or none. Then the hours that they worked that week, and you multiply that by their hourly rate, gives us the gross that they earned that week. And the functions that we're going to be going over are the count and COUNTA. You can see the term and the definition there. The count function is going to count up all cells that contain numbers. So how would you use this, or why would you want to use it? It depends upon your database. If I want to find out how many employees have worked this week, instead of counting them, well, by eyeballing it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I can use the count function to count up because I have their hours here. The number of cells that contain numbers, meaning that they put in at least an hour or something, as long as it's got a number in there, it's going to count it up. So to go ahead and do this, you can hit the equals key on the keyboard, type in the first couple letters, and it brings it up right there. Count, it's highlighted. You can see in the pop-up, counts the number of cells in a range that contain numbers. Hit the tab key to pop open the function so we can go ahead and select our range. Either type it in 5 through G14, or click and drag to select it. I mean, you may not want to select it if your range goes down to row 200. I mean, once you start clicking and dragging, Excel picks up and goes off on a frenzy and just shoots it all the way down past 200. So you may want to type it in. In any case, hit enter. Hey, sweet. There's a total of 7 that we selected that contain values, and those are the number of employees that worked this week. Now, on another note, down below in the status bar, when you click and drag to select a range of cells, as you recall, we get some of the functions listed down below, the average, sum, and also the count. But the count down below is not the same as the count function that we just used. If you hover over it, in the pop-up, it says the number of selected cells that contain data, not numbers, but just data. So it can be text, it can be numbers, it can be a combination. So you want to keep that in mind, that when you select a range and you go, oh, let me go ahead and select this range here that just contains text, and go, okay, the count function says there are 8. Wait a second, I thought it was just numbers. No, the one in the status bar, the count there, is not the same as the count function, okay? If you want to do the count in the status bar, then don't look at the count here. Go ahead and right-click on it to customize it and do numerical count, okay? Select that. Once you check it and you click off of it, it's not going to show the number of cells that contain numbers because the selection that we have do not contain numbers. So if we go ahead and select this range, numerical count counts up 7 that it sees, and of course count is going to count up the same number because coincidentally those cells that we have selected contain data. Whether it's text, numbers, it's going to reflect the same. So you can see the difference between the two if I select this range here, where the count here says it sees all those cells that contain something as 15, and those that only contain numbers are 10 for the numerical count. Right click, let's go ahead and uncheck numerical count, click off in a blank area, and let's do count A, which will count the cells that are not empty. Okay, how does that work? Well, if you want to find out, let's say, how many employees have worked this week out of the total of 10 that we have here, instead of counting them up, those cells that contain the number of hours that they worked, and say, okay, this one worked, that one worked, total of 7, do the count A, and it will count again all those cells that aren't empty, which would give us 7. Or you can do it for benefits and say, okay, we want to find out how many employees have benefits, and we can just go ahead and type in equals count, and then arrow down to get count A. Again, counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. Hit the tab key to pop it open, click and drag to select the range of benefits, hit enter, and how many out of the 10 that have benefits? 8. Those are pretty good odds. At least they have one type of benefit or another, whether it's dental or medical or both. What you're looking at is a mini database here of essential oils that we sold in both the US and the UK, and we're going to use it to learn how to move, copy, and cut data. Now before you turn off the video and say, yeah, I already know how to do the basics, I've got more than just the basics. In fact, when you watch most of my training videos, if not all of them, If you know something about it, you may want to watch it because I try to throw in some extra shortcuts and helpful hints that not a lot of people, well, that I've come across, know about. In any case, so we don't bypass anybody on this, let's start with the basics and learn how to copy and paste. But before we do that, let's go ahead and add up the total for this employee for the sales that they made in the months of January through April. And to do that, we're going to come up here and click on the Formulas tab, go to the Function Library group, and click on AutoSum. And Excel's going to see a pattern here, a range that it thinks that you want to add up, but that's not the range. So let's go ahead and click and drag and select the range that we want to add up, which are these months for that employee that they made sales, C6 through F6, and hit Enter, and there we go. Okay, so now that we have the formula there, as we learned in an earlier training video, we can copy that and paste it in other cells or the next cell down below because it's going to be the same formula. Of course, it's going to be in a different row, so it's going to update it and say this is going to be for row 7 and not keep the same row, otherwise it would get the same value that we see up here. So to go ahead and copy a cell or arrange a cells by clicking and dragging and selecting whatever range you want to copy, let me just go ahead and select the cell here because that's one we want to copy. You can either right click on it and go down to copy, or you can Control C, which are the shortcut keys to copy, or you can come up here on the Home tab to the Clipboard group and click on the Copy button. Now when you click Copy, you're going to get these green lines racing around it. That means Excel's in copy mode. Well, it reminds me of ants marching around a picnic table. In any case, it's in copy mode to go ahead and start pasting what is being selected with those marching ants. Select another cell, and basically it's the same thing when it comes to pasting. You get the right-click option, and down you get a lot of paste options. You can go ahead and choose the basic one, which I recommend, until we learn more about the other paste options. Or again, you can come up here on the Home tab to the Clipboard group and click on Paste, or you can use the shortcut keys Control V as in Victor, and that will paste as well. And it'll give you a tag here to open up to say, okay, once you paste it, is there anything that you want as an option? Like, do you want to go ahead and keep the source formatting? In other words, if the source had formatting applied to it, like bold in the color red, it would also bring that formatting over as well. In any case, there we go. And it's still in copy mode, so you can keep on, pasting until you got everything pasted that you want for the formula, because the formula up here can be pasted in these two next cells here and also for the UK down below. But before we do that, let me hit the Escape key. As you recall, you can go ahead and do autofill. You can click and drag the formula down and it'll automatically fill in the formula there. But here's another shortcut that I think you'll find helpful. We've got the cell here that contains the formula, and it's correct because it's referring to row 7 and still the same columns, January through April, or C through F. The shortcut is that go ahead and put it in copy mode, so Control C, and then go ahead and select all the other cells that you want to paste this formula into. And as you recall in an earlier training video, to select more than one cell at the same time and non-consecutive cells, use the Control key. So hold down the Control key, click and drag to select those two cells, and then with the Control key still held down, click and drag to select that range. And then just hit Enter on the keyboard and hey, sweet. Isn't that fun? There's a shortcut that will automatically take what you have copied and whatever you select and hit Enter, copy that cell over into those other cells. Now let's double check to make sure that it did copy the formula. Come down here, select a cell. And is it the same formula where it's going to add up the range, and is it the correct range? You can see up here in the formula bar, or you can double click really fast, which is probably the easiest thing to do to see if it's really the correct range for where it's at here. And yeah, it's selecting the cells adjacent, well, not exactly adjacent to it, but within the same row and the same range that we started up at the top here when we inserted the first formula. Cool. Go ahead and hit the Escape key to get out of that. Now next we can learn how to move a range of cells. So if we're thinking, you know what, the totals isn't close enough, or maybe we need to move it out further. If it's just a cell or a range, click and drag to select the range, and to move that range, or just a cell, hover over the border until you go from a white cross to a four-way arrow, indicating that you can move whatever you have selected up, down, left, or right. You can click and drag to push it in so it's closer, or you can click and drag and move it back. Now, when it comes to short distances, I think that works just well. But if you're going to go ahead and move this range here way out there, maybe to column AA, well, when it comes to clicking and dragging that far, Excel gets kind of excited and it starts picking up speed, and then it's hard to slow them down. So for me, if it's not within a short distance, I'll use the cut and paste feature. To go ahead and do that, it's basically the same as copying and pasting. Go ahead and select your cell or range of cells and right click. You get the cut option, and again you get the marching ants. I mean, how can you tell whether it's going to cut or copy? Well, if you can't remember, you're in trouble, because Excel's not going to tell you here. With the marching ants, they're the same. They're not shouting out little callouts that you're cutting or copying. So the only way we can find out what we just did is either hit the escape key and start over, or just come over here and paste in a new cell, which brings up a good point. You don't have to select a range that's equal to the range that you're copying. Just click in a cell, and whatever it can't fit into the cell, it'll expand it. And because it can't fit everything here that we have selected into one cell, because it's in separate cells by default, it's going to expand it, and it'll have its own cell for each data within its own cell when we originally cut it. So go ahead and right click on it, go down to paste, or Control V as in Victor to paste, and there you go. And then of course you can click and drag to move it back. Choose the way that works best for you. Now there's also the move and copy feature, where you can, while moving a cell, copy it at the same time. In this example, maybe I want to go ahead and put the totals here, so I can start adding up the totals for the months here for the US. And so instead of retyping in totals, I could come up here and click on the totals cell and click and drag it to move it. And you're like, wait a second, are you really going to move that? Because if you move it, you won't have the totals label up above. If I hold down the Control key while I'm moving it, let me move it over here. You see that little plus sign to the right of my pointer there? I don't know if you can see it. Go ahead and try it on your computer. You should be able to see it, hopefully. That little plus sign means that when you click and drag any cell, it's going to make a copy of it. So let go of the mouse, then let go of the Control key, and there you go. It didn't move the totals. It just, while moving, when I hit the Control key, it made a copy of it. You can click and drag the border down here and let go, and it made a copy of the cell that I had selected, and I clicked and dragged down to cell B21. Now you can also work with columns here. If you want to cut or copy an entire column or columns, just go ahead and click and drag on the column headers, or click and drag on the row headers. So let's keep it simple and click on column H. You can see the black arrow pointing down, so it'll select the entire column. Again, you can right click to get your options there, or use the shortcut keys. We can cut that, and then right click on column K and go down to the paste option. And if I'm pasting into a cell that's taking up or has been merged with other cells, let's go ahead and click cancel. I don't want to do that, is what I'm saying. Let me go ahead and right click on column L and go down to paste, and there we go. I'm going to go ahead and hit undo and hit the escape key to get out of that. Now if you have multiple items that you want to copy, in other words, instead of copying one part of your worksheet and coming over here and pasting it, coming over here, copying that, and pasting it over here one at a time, that can be very annoying. They have what's called a clipboard that you can go ahead and do all your copying at once, and then come over here with the clipboard, and from the clipboard, select all those that you want to paste that you added to the clipboard. To open up the clipboard, come up here on the Home tab to the Clipboard group, and there's the expandable dialog box button, and it allows you to see all the items you've copied to the clipboard. Click on it, and there's the clipboard. And what we can do is we can go ahead and select one cell, Control C to copy it, to add it, and you can see down below in the lower right hand corner, the window says that it allows you up to 24 items to copy. So let's go to the second item, and we're 2 of 24, and the third item, and you can see that they're being added over here. Whatever that you want to copy, and have them all on the clipboard at once instead of going back and forth, copying one item or a range of cells at one time. Get them all copied up to 24, then go ahead and move to another part of your worksheet or within the workbook, or even an entirely new workbook. If you want to come up here and click on the File tab, go down to New, and click on Blank Workbook, then it's right there as well. So I can go to a new workbook. You can see up here on the title bar, Book 1. It's not the Move, Copy, Cut, and Paste workbook. And then you can go ahead and pick which one you want to add. So you can do it in a more organized format. And next would be February, and then, well, if you remember the numbers where they need to go. But nonetheless, you can do all your copying at once, not one at a time, and use the clipboard to go ahead and paste it. And when you hover over it, you can click on the drop-down arrow to paste it or delete it. You can also right-click to get the paste and delete option as well. And you can go ahead and select a cell and say paste all. And then when you're done, let's go ahead and clear all, close out. Let's close out of the blank workbook and not save it. Go ahead and close out of here. The clipboard, go back to our first worksheet, and we're back to where we started. As you recall in earlier training videos, when we inserted a function or formula, as you can see with this selected cell up in the formula bar, we got a formula that we also wanted to go ahead and use in these other cells, but we didn't want to retype it, so we copied and pasted it. Well, every time you copy and paste that formula, it updated it and it changed. What did it change? Well, it was relative to what we pasted it into. If it was in another column, it just updated the references to reflect the new column that we were in. So here's column C. The next formula, it updated to column D, and so on. Goes with the rows here. So when we take a formula and we copy it down row by row, it keeps the same formula, but it updates it and it changes it to reflect the next row. Again, that's a relative reference where it always changes and updates when you copy that formula. Well, what if you come across a formula that you don't want it to update when you copy it to other cells? That's what we're going to learn here, and it's known as an absolute reference. It's a cell reference in a formula that remains the same when the formula is copied to other cells. Let me show you. I got a formula that I want to insert over here to calculate the commission. So we have the total that the employee earned for that month or brought in, and we want to multiply it by this cell here, 8%, to find out or figure out the commission. So let's go ahead and hit the equals key on the keyboard, select that cell, and the symbol for multiplication is the asterisk. Go ahead and type that in. Then select the other cell, the 8%, and hit enter. Okay, there's the commission rate and what they earned for those 4 months, and hopefully it's in thousands of dollars. So you'd think, hey, let me just go ahead and select the cell and copy and paste it so I don't have to retype that formula over and over again. Well, you can go ahead and try, but watch what happens. When I Control C to copy it and Control V as in Victor to paste it, and then paste it, and then paste it. Well, what the fudge? I'm getting all these weird things. How come this isn't working? Let me hit the escape key to get rid of the marching ants. Well, this is where we don't want it to update when we go ahead and we copy that formula to another cell. Well, what part of the formula do we not want it to update or change? And we want it to be absolute, stay where it's at, and be constant. Well, let's go ahead and select the cell here and look up here in the formula bar, and you can click in the formula bar. When you copy and paste, this one is going to go down row by row as we advance to the next row, but so is the commission. Does that make sense? Let me hit the escape key and go down to the next cell and come up here and click in the formula bar. You see how it's relative? Excel's just doing the same thing as a pattern, saying, okay, well, I'm down to the next row, so let's go ahead and move this reference down to the next row, but there's nothing there. So that doesn't work. When it comes to commission, we want it to stay in cell H3. We want it to be absolute, constant, don't move. But the other part of the formula, the reference, needs to go ahead and move down so we can get the other commissions calculated for each employee. So how are we going to do this? Let me hit the escape key on the keyboard, go back to the original formula. Oh, by the way, how come it goes from 0 to value? Well, just double click. It's trying to multiply a cell that contains text, and that's why you get the value error, as opposed to, let me hit the escape key, a double click, where you have nothing in there, and it's multiplying a number, so you get 0. You do a little homework on that, find out why you get the different types of errors just by digging down into the formula and finding out the references of those cells. Are you multiplying by text or an empty cell? And that's what we're looking at in this case. Hit the escape key. Let's go back to the original formula, and let's go ahead and come up here in the formula bar. And what cell do we want to stay as an absolute cell? It's going to be H3. This one right here, the commissions. So when we go ahead and we copy and paste it, it doesn't move. We want this dog, Fido, to stay. What you need to do is click before that cell reference H3 and hit the F4 key on the keyboard. When you hit the F4 key on the keyboard, it inserts these dollar signs, well, that are known as absolutes, meaning that the dollar sign next to the H says keep the H column put. In other words, we can copy and paste this formula wherever we want, but it will always reference the H column. Now, not just the H column, but we also have the dollar sign next to the 3, so it's saying always reference that row. And when you put them together, it says it's always going to be H3. That will never move, never change, no matter where you copy and paste this formula into. But this part of the formula that we're referencing will update wherever we paste it. But this part won't, because it's always going to be referring to that cell. And I call it Fido because, think about it, F4. F is for Fido. And how many letters do you have in Fido? F-I-D-O, 4. Hey, that's the way I remember things. So once we do that, and we put an absolute, do not move, these dollar signs next to the H and the 3, and the F4 key was a shortcut. You don't have to use F4. You can go ahead and type in the dollar sign next to the cell before H and before 3 or whatever cell you're using. That's fine. And not only that, but if you hit F4 again, it'll toggle through and say, okay, we'll just keep the row 3. The H will update if you copy it in another column, or you can hit F4 again and say, okay, the H has to stay. In other words, it's always going to be referencing that column, but if you move to a new row, it'll update to another row, or F4 again to remove the absolutes and go back to just a simple relative reference here. Again, F4 solidifies and says stay in that column, in that row, always H3. Go ahead and hit enter. So when I click and drag the autofill handle down, or copy and paste, or double click really fast on the autofill handle, automatically copies it down to the end of the range that it can see logically, and we get the correct number because when you double click, it didn't update and pull this down. That part of the referencing in the cell, it stayed. Fido stayed, F4, right? The dollar symbols, the absolutes. But it updated that part of the cell reference, so we can go to the next row here for that employee and hit the escape key and double click, and it can go down to the next row, but again, it's always staying on that cell, the commission cell, so we get accurate results. So that, and maybe other times where you're copying and pasting where you're only referencing one cell, and you always want it to be that one cell and not have it updated as you copy and paste along, then go ahead and use those absolute references, the dollar signs, where you can go ahead and have it for both the column and the row so it doesn't change, or what's referred to as a mixed reference, where it's only referencing of the H3, maybe just the 3 is going to have the dollar sign, or maybe just the H is going to have the dollar sign or the absolute, so it's always going to be referencing that column, but never the same row. Depending upon if you're pasting column by column, it'll stay in that column, but if you're pasting row by row, well, it's relative because we don't have the dollar sign there, so let's go ahead and add it back in and hit enter. And let's see, I want to give them something a little bit extra to get ready for Christmas, so let's increase their commission by 10%, hit enter, and you can see it updates all of the cells there because these formulas are all dependent upon the value within the cell and also the totals here as well. And you can see how it automatically updated them just by changing the number here or changing any of the totals here. But I won't do that because the totals here are based upon the numbers here, which I can go ahead and change. It'll update that, which in turn, once that's updated, because that one's looking at that cell, it'll update that as well. So if we type something like 1,000, 10,000, wow, that's sweet. Let's go ahead and hit undo. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.